Okay, sir, we're ready when you are.
Oh, I'm ready. Should I just start talking?
Yes, sir.
Well, I'm glad to be back. Hey, Cole, I'm glad to be back here with the Mecklenburg County Jail, and I'm excited to go through this program. It's my understanding that we have 2 weeks together, and I've kind of prepared this background, but when I prepared this video, my thoughts were that none of us had spoken before, and so now I know that you're the same group with whom I spoke the first time I interacted with the Mecklenburg County Jail. So I guess we're gonna go through this thing, and I don't really have to go through my entire background, unless there's anybody in the group. Is there anybody in the group that has not participated in the first program?
Yes.
There are?
Yes.
Okay. Would it be really great if I just start off by letting you know what I'm trying to accomplish here? What I'm trying to do is to help people who are, living in jails and prisons across America to understand how important it is to connect the decisions that they make today with what they're going to do in the next year, the next 5 years, the next 10 years. By way of background, I started my journey inside of a jail back in 1987 when I was 23 years old. And I want you to know that I served 26 years in federal prison as a result of some really bad decisions that I started to make while I was in jail. And I want to give you guys the overview of that background, but we'll start off with this understanding and premise that there's nothing that anybody cannot ask me about my time before jail, my time during jail and imprisonment. I was incarcerated, as I said, for 26 years, and what my return to society has been. So if everybody understands that, we're going to be able to work really well together, because you guys will be able to come up to the microphone and ask questions and interact with me. So just because I can only see like a few of the people in there, and I don't really have a full grasp of the entire layout, although I've been in a lot of pods that were designed exactly like that, so I'm somewhat familiar. If you have a microphone there and somebody wants to say something, please don't feel as if you have to wait until the end of the program or the end of the class to give me to break in, because I'm very flexible and I'm here to serve you. I know this is the kind of program that would have been very valuable to me when I was in jail, because I would have wanted to know, what can I do today to start sowing seeds for a better life? And this is the curriculum that I really began building toward the end of my journey in prison, and I call it the Straight A Guide. So this Straight A Guide, and today, I know we have 2 hours together. I want to just give you like an overview during the first. I want to tell you a little bit about what I'm going to do. So if it's okay, I'm going to share my screen with you and give you a vision of this PowerPoint that I created, but with the caveat that I want you to remember, I created this PowerPoint thinking that that none of you would have ever heard from me or knew who I was before. So I'm going to share my screen right now so you can kind of see how we're going to go. And if you guys have anything that you'd like to share or say, please just step up to the microphone and we'll go from there. So can you guys see my screen right now?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So the first thing that I was going to do is just give this introduction about, why I created the course. I want you to know who I am. And of course, since you guys already know, you guys have an idea of that information. So that this is actually the wrong time zone, because I know it's 9:05 to 9:08. So I was thinking I'd talk about that until about 10 after 9. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about what the program is. That's going to take us till about 12 after 9, I guess there. I'm going to talk about why I wanted to create this program. I'm going to talk then about when you got to get started preparing, what my thoughts are on that, how I designed this course, And then I want to have a quiz. And we'll do that around, I guess it's going to be about 9:25 your time. We're going to have a little bit of a quiz just to help us with some interactive discussion. Then I'm going to tell you guys about an exit exam that I kind of created and what the purpose of that is. That'll take us till about I guess it's 9:45 your time. And then we'll go over this overview of the entire course because I want to explain it all because we're going to be together for every day this week and every day next week. And I'll walk you through what that overview looks like. And then we're going to get into this discussion on values, which is the first module. And we'll watch a video that I prepared and then go through some questions and interactive. And that'll take us to the end. But of course, I'm very, very flexible in all of this. There is no reason that we can't break. If any of you guys have questions that you want to go over, I really would welcome that interactivity because a course like this really works best with interactivity. So please don't be, it's a little bit of a different kind of a course, I think, from a lot of the other ones that I went through when I was in jail because they were generally taught by either, psychologists or probation officers or something like that. And I'm none of that, right? I am a guy that was in those seats. I'm very familiar with that environment. It's an environment that I don't ever want to return to, but I know that it's the decisions that I made when I was in there that made all the difference in the world. And I think that's the case for each of you as well. So we're going to start there, but I want to ask, repeatedly through there, is there anybody that has any questions or they'd like to take it in a different direction? Okay. So I'm gonna tell you guys a little bit about that introduction then, and I know that you guys have read some of my materials already, so you know a little bit about this. That when I went to jail, I heard this message from so many people around me that the best way to serve time is to forget about the world outside and just focus on doing time inside of jail or getting ready for my reputation of what it's going to be like in prison, or just try to disconnect because there's so much pain with trying to be involved in society that while we're serving time, and it feels like we're really not even human beings. We've got all kinds of people pulling the strings in our life, right? It might be the jail itself that is telling us when to eat and when to sleep and who we're going to live with and when we're going to do our activities. I mean, all of you guys are in this course right now. I don't know if you guys are here voluntarily because you want to participate, or if you're here on a compulsory manner because they forced you to be here. But my only goal and mission is to share with you, hey, this is what I learned when I was in there. Because when I started, the only thing that I wanted was to get out of jail. That was my only thought. I want to get out of here. And I hated being in there and didn't really even think about what I was going to do when I got out. I thought I'd figure that out on the other side of the journey. And that was kind of the message that I think that the environment I was in, and I was in the Pierce County jail when this was going down in my head. I spent a lot of time in segregated housing at that time because I was a high profile. My case was high profile. And so they locked me in the shoe because I was facing life in prison, and the jail didn't have a pod for people like that. But then when I got into the general population, after I think it was like probably a month or two of being in, I guess you'd call it kind of isolation or quarantine or whatever it was at that time. I was so new to jail, I didn't understand it. When I got to the jail, I just kept hearing this message that forget about the world outside. This is the way to do time, and I made decisions along that road, and it really made things more difficult for me. Because instead of thinking about what I could do to change my outcome and change my life for the better, I made decisions that exposed me to a longer prison sentence. And what I meant by that is, I continued to participate in the crime that got me in there, which I was in for selling cocaine. And I continued that operations even while I was in the jail. And it resulted in just before I went to trial, because I was held pre-trial, like I'm sure some of you are. Just before I went to trial, or actually maybe it was during my trial. Yeah, it was during my trial. They launched a second indictment, and I got indicted a second time while I was in custody. So really, that's really what kind of woke me up after I was convicted of both the one that I went to trial for and then facing the new charges. It's really what woke me up and helped me recognize I'm really on a bad path and I want to change my life. And so that's really what I'm asking each of you to be thinking about right now. And it's hard when you're in there, but don't only think about where you are. Don't only think about the past that got you where you are. It's much, much better if you really hate being in jail, if you really hate the thought of going to prison, to be thinking about your future rather than your past. Because I knew there was nothing I could do to change my past. Once I came to this realization, I knew there is nothing I can do to change my past. There's nothing I can do that's going to change the way a prosecutor sees me from my past decisions. There might be something I can do to change the way he sees me in the future. There's nothing I can do to change what the judge is going to be considering because of my past. There might be something I can do about how they're going to see me in the future. The challenge, I think, for each of you, just like it was a challenge for me, is wondering, well, how long is it going to take for me to begin reaping the benefits of what I'm going through right now? And that's hard because I know that all of you miss your family. I know that all of you are, feel somewhat that you shouldn't be here. And you may feel like the system isn't fair. But the reality is, as human beings, one lesson I learned is we've got to live in the world as it exists. We can't, if we try to live in the world as we want it to be, we end up with a lot of problems. And I was kind of sick and tired of wanting to have those kinds of problems in my life. I wanted to have something, I wanted to work towards something better. I wanted to work toward a life that I would be able to provide for my family, where I wouldn't have to be running from any law enforcement officer or anybody else, and nobody would have to be thinking about me or be a threat to me. I just wanted to be a member of the community again, because I really hated jail. I hated everything about being in jail. I hated the noise. I hated that I couldn't control what I was going to eat. I hated that, the way that the media was characterizing me as being, a criminal. I hated thinking that when I come home, there might not be a job for me. There might not be an opportunity for me to get credit. There might not be an opportunity for me to function or even live in society. That was, something I really couldn't stand the thought of. And I suspect that all of you feel that same way. But the reality is, all of us have to begin saying, okay, that's our past. There's nothing I can do about our past. What can we do about our future? And I want each of you to be thinking about your future and be thinking about, what did I do today or yesterday or last week? And how is that going to relate to what I become in the weeks, months, years ahead? And sometimes it's good to get that information from people who have been in your shoes. I didn't have that vision when I was in jail because it was a different time. Back at the time that I was starting my sentence, we were really at the dawn of mass incarceration. We were at the start of this really ramp up in jails and prison populations, and there was a push to take programs out of prisons and jails, not to bring programs in. That was, in the federal system, the beginning of what are called determinate sentences, meaning there's no more parole board. It was the beginning of less good time. So you'd have to serve 85% of your time, or actually at the time it was like 87% of your time. I was convicted under the old law, so those sentencing laws still applied to me, but the mindset of the jail was very, very different for me. And yet I knew that I really hated where I was. It wasn't until I got inspired by somebody who actually worked in the jail. He was an officer that just passed me this book. And I know that you guys have read some of my things, but it was this book about philosophy. And I didn't know what philosophy was at the time, but I could connect with the guy because he was in jail. And as a result of this guy being in jail, and I felt that I was in here I knew I was going to be in here for a very, very long time. I wanted to learn from him. How come he's looking at this situation differently from me? And that's one of the lessons that I learned at the very start is I got to stop thinking about how did I get here, and I got to start thinking about how do I want to live and how do I want to get out. And that's really what shifted everything for me. It's what had me start asking different kinds of questions. And I don't know where you are in this journey. I've heard that some of you are like within a month of getting released. I've heard that some of you are federal prisoners and you don't know because you haven't been sentenced yet, and you may be going into the system and you don't know what do I have to do. But I know that I didn't get this message until it was kind of late for me. I'd already made some bad decisions while I was in jail that would result in, as I said in my previous episode, me getting a very long term. Had I began asking different questions about how I'm going to define success, about what is important to me, I probably would have made different decisions when I was in jail. And what do I say probably? Well, if somebody that worked for the jail or the prison was telling me how to think, I probably would have been pretty skeptical about getting that information because I wasn't in the mindset to begin receiving that advice from somebody who worked for the jail or the prison. And if I had heard from guys who had influence inside of the jail, other people serving time, who are those people, right? You got to think, who are the influencers in jail or prison? Are they the type of people that build successful lives in society and in the community? Or are they people who have influence inside of the penal system? And I was getting advice from people who had influence inside of the penal system. I was getting advice from guys who'd been in jail multiple times or who had been in prison multiple times, and I was facing life without parole. So I was trying to listen and learn from those guys. What's it going to be like? How do you survive in here, right? What's the best way to do time? And it was because I listened to those guys that I continued my criminal activity while I was inside of the jail. And it's because I listened to those guys that I continued making really bad decisions while I was in jail. And it's because I listened to those guys that I was eventually indicted a second time. And it's because I listened to those guys that I acted in ways that exposed me to a sentence of 45 years in federal prison. So after I got this message, I didn't get this message until after it was kind of late for me in the game. But it wasn't too late for me in the game for it to influence my journey through prison. It was while I was in that jail that I decided I am going to change my mindset. And regardless of where you are right now in your journey, you can make a decision of what you want to do. You can make a decision if you're ready to get out of jail in a month. You can be thinking about some of the challenges that you're going to be facing with regard to getting employment, with regard to where you're going to be in a year, in 3 years. If you get out, if you're not thinking about that and all you're thinking about is getting out of the door, then that should prompt you to have some other questions about, well, what if things don't work out? What am I going to do? Where am I going to live? Because it's not easy ever to get out of jail or prison, but it's especially not easy right now. When you've got a pandemic kind of going around the country, you've got, as you know, I'm sure because you're watching the news just like I am, social unrest around the country. All of these things are potential problems, but they're also potential opportunities, because whenever there is something like that going on around the world, that means there's going to be rebuilding. And your ability to put yourself in the position of bringing value is going to make all the difference in the world. And I want to tell you, throughout this course, I will never ask you to do anything that I am not doing myself. This is how I build businesses with this mindset. This is how I got through, once I changed my mindset in jail, this is how I started to sow the seeds to change while I was in prison. This was the strategy that really helped me along the way. And it really all starts with mindset. Everything really begins with how I think and how I look at a problem. Now, I just described the mindset that I had, or the mindset of maybe somebody who's about to get out. What are they facing? Those guys in there in the pod that are a month away from getting out. But what about the guys in there that haven't been sentenced yet? You can use this same strategy of asking these kinds of questions to help you make better decisions. And, on this entire program, one of the things that I do is I'm always trying to give away this kind of information and insight, because I truly believe this is the way I can live up to the blessings that came my way. I started, my first kind of mentor in here was Socrates, as I've written about, and we'll talk about as we get a little deeper into this. But later, there were many, many other people that influenced me. Like, I was really inspired by a guy by the name of Gandhi, who had a statement that says, try to be the change that you want to see in the world. Well, one thing I really hate is mass incarceration. I really hate that our nation puts so many people in jail and prison and keeps them there for so long. And while they're going through it, they're getting this message that brings intergenerational problems, right? So, I don't have children because I'm now 56 years old, and I went in when I was 23, and, I was 49 when I got out. My wife is that age. Just the opportunity to have a child is just something I lost because of my bad decisions during my youth. But I know the statistics, and I know that people who go through the system, including me, if I had a child, our children are far more likely to come into this system. And I don't think it's the responsibility of government to change that. I don't think it's the responsibility of the jail to change that. I think it's our responsibility. As people who've been in jail and prison, it's our responsibility to come back in and share the lessons that we have learned. And that's what I'm committed to do. So when Gandhi said, be the change that you want to see in the world, I really aspired to be that change. And so, I'm telling you that if you're going into the system, my recommendation to you is that get as much information as you possibly can today to figure out, how can I influence this journey ahead? Instead of making bad decisions that are going to exacerbate or make my problems more difficult, I got to put my mind, my actions in the mindset of the prosecutor, in the mindset of the judge, in the mindset of the probation officer that's going to write my pre-sentence investigation report, in the mindset of the case managers that are going to see me in prison, in the mindset of the people that can eventually let me out of prison. I got to start thinking about those people today. what can I do today to influence how they're going to see me? And I got a whole bunch of information on that on our website at Prison Professors. This, course is really much more broad than giving the specific information. It's much more broad of having you just ask those kinds of Socratic questions. What steps can you take today to influence the people that you want to see in your future? If I had started with those kinds of questions in the beginning, I probably would have just kind of carried through what I was going to get if I just listened to the people that had influence in the jail. Or if I would have just listened to the message that I received from the people who ran the jail. And that message was, you got nothing coming, right? You can't do the time, don't do the crime. I'm sure all of you have heard that before, but I want to try and disrupt that mindset. That's what I'm all about, disrupting that mindset. And the best way that I can do it is tell you, I'm a person just like you. The only difference is I'm on the other side of the journey after going through 9,500 days as a prisoner and being home now for 6.5 years. I can tell you my adjustment is very different from a lot of the guys with whom I work that are coming home, that are really struggling. And I want to show you guys, hey, there's a time to stop this. And it's not only going to be my story. I'm going to introduce you to a lot of other stories as we go through this course. But that's really what I wanted to bring in the beginning. And now I think it's important for you guys, if you're willing to participate with me and be interactive, for me to throw this quiz up on the screen and have you guys use your paper to kind of respond to the questions. So I'm going to look for the screen here. You guys don't have the quiz, do you? Right now in front of you?
No.
I can't hear. Do any of you guys have the quiz?
No.
Okay, let me, I'm going to pull it up then, and I'm just going to throw it up on the screen, and we're going to share the screen, and you guys will be able to see it. So I've got to use some technology here, and I hope you can see my screen right now. Is that big enough?
Yeah.
So there's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 questions. It's 25 after the hour or 26 after the hour. I'd like each of you just to think about them, and I'd like to ask a couple of guys to interact with me and talk about your responses to those questions, and we'll go through some time in an interactive way where we can kind of discuss them. So those questions are, what does success mean for you? What have you done over the past week to make your commitment to success self-evident? What opportunities do you expect to open as a result of the pathway that you're engineering? In what ways will your market value your efforts? And how does your process relate to science and repeatability? And I want you to know there's no right answer. There's no wrong answer. But it would be really awesome if you guys wrote your thoughts out on that so that we could then discuss them. And I'm just going to be quiet for about, I guess, 5 or 10 minutes. And so I'm going to come back on around 35 minutes after the hour. I guess that's 8 minutes. And I'm hoping that some of you guys will interact with me as if I were there, because that's what I'd be asking you to do if you were there. And then if you don't want to interact, well, then we're going to explore that as well.